This image is pretty basic. It's not very impressive, but I've created it with a specific thing in mind, which is putting all the techniques together and doing it in a sort of low stress environment. So if you want to follow along, this is included in the resources folder. And you'll notice that this base image is pretty straightforward, doesn't have a lot of lighting, but it does include paths and alpha channels. And then if you look at these 9 examples, these are pretty dramatically different variations. Well, because I spent all that time ahead of time, each variation maybe only took 10 minutes to paint over. Now, of course, you would use these exact same techniques in your own illustrations later, but I hope you'll use this test document as a way to just mess around, see how far you can push the limits. So to get a sense of how this works in action, I'm going to go ahead and show you a few examples. Now, to make major changes like this, I actually love using adjustment layers, and I'm not going to keep them in my document forever, but they're a great starting point. So if I want to make the floor darker, I'll select the floor, use an adjustment here, and just make it darker. I'll also up the contrast a bit. I also want to make my ceiling a bit brighter, so I'll grab the ceiling path. And I could either do an adjustment layer or I could paint it by hand, really whatever you want to do. And I also just want to add some general ambient shadows into the room, but I don't want them on the ceiling. And I also don't want them on the ball. So I'll select the ceiling and I'll add to that selection 3 spheres. And then I will take the inverse of that selection, make a new layer set, put that mask. So now any layer inside of this set will not worry about painting on top of the light source or on top of the balls. So I can just paint with a big airbrush here and knock that value down a little bit. And if I wanted to use multiple layers inside of this group, I could just make a new layer, paint a bit, and then erase away what I don't want. Next, let's paint the form shadows on the ball. So I'll do them one at a time here just to show an example. We'll start on a new layer outside of this layer group. I'll click the foreground sphere. And I'm just selecting colors from already inside my image. Next, I'll grab the middle sphere. And then the background sphere. And I'm using a very soft brush, but it doesn't matter because I have a hard edge thanks to my selection. So already the image has a much stronger sense of lighting. Well, maybe I want to change the color of the floor. Okay, no problem. I will select my floor. And this time I'm going to do a photo filter. And we'll add sort of a reddish color. Well, maybe I don't want the floor to be as red as it moves back into depth. So I can modify this mask on the photo filter by just painting with black paint where I don't want it to be visible. So now you can see the floor moves from red in the foreground to the original color in the background. All right, let's add some reflections in the floor. And I'll do that first by selecting the floor, make a new group, call that a selection. In this layer, I want to be linear dodge. And I'm just going to select sort of a dark color here and paint with soft brush. Now maybe what I want is to have this only on certain values, so it looks like each of these tiles has a slightly different reflectivity. Now a great way to do that would be blend if. So here I'm worrying about the value of the underlying layer. I find the right balance. And there you can see that it is picking up that checkerboard very strongly. Nice. And then maybe I decide I want to add a little bit of atmospheric perspective to the whole room. So I will do my far selection, make a group, call a mask up, and once again I'm going to paint with a soft brush. I'm going to pick a cooler color, and I'll begin to paint that in to the background. And this just has a nice way of enhancing that sense of depth by lowering the contrast as you recede into space, and it makes the foreground more prominent. And maybe if I decide I want to increase the prominence of these foreground balls, I will select the sphere foreground, make a new layer set, and then I'll do a levels adjustment here just to brighten it up a bit. And maybe this would be an opportunity to even change the color. Why not? Now at this point my layer stack is getting a little messy. Well, no problem. I can just copy all these together and I don't have to worry about it. Because remember, my control comes from the selections, not the layer stack. Now as I've changed the color of this ball here, I should probably update that in the floor's reflection. So I'll select the floor, make a group, put a mask on it, and here I'll paint some of the ball's color into the floor, erasing away where the cast shadow is. And that'll just integrate my ball into the scene. Okay, let's try another example, and this time we're going to do sort of a backlit situation. So I'm going to begin by just darkening everything down a bit. And then I want the back wall to be sort of a lighting element. And I don't actually have a selection for that, but it's a rectangle, so that's pretty easy to make. Now I don't want the balls included in this selection, so I'll remove with Control Alt the 3 spheres selection. And here I'm just going to paint with a bright value. And in this case, I can actually probably use this faraway depth alpha channel just to create sort of a glowing white light. And I'm going to knock this down a bit. Okay, that gives us a nice effect. Now I want to go ahead and make these balls darker, as if they're being lit prominently from behind, and then they're going to have some cast shadows coming towards the viewer. So I'll select 3 spheres, make a new layer, and I'll just paint in some darker values here. And then I need to give some cast shadows on the floor. So the way I do that is select the floor, make a group, put a mask on it, make a new layer, and here I'm going to paint with pretty dark shadow values. But since these balls are sort of overlapping each other, I'm going to use a little bit of rim lighting to make them stand out. To do that, I'm going to select them each individually. So first I will do the foreground sphere, make a new layer, mask the layer, and I'm just going to pick one of these lighter values and sort of wrap it around the sphere here. You could use a soft brush, you could use a hard brush, whatever you want to do. And then I can erase away what I don't want. And then I'll repeat that process for the middle sphere. And one more time for the background sphere. And then to ground these spheres a little bit, I'm going to make a new layer, select all 3, and just add some a very dark core shadow here. And if my light source is at the rear of the room, I'm going to go ahead and make the near area, as in the near depth selection, a little bit darker. And I'll see what a solid fill looks like here, although I think I'm going to need to modify it a little bit. Yeah, so I'm going to put a mask on this and just manually paint out a little bit. I don't want it to be so shadowy. Well, now I've got a little bit of a problem because my floor and my walls are essentially the same value, and that's flattening out the scene. So I'm going to raise the value of my floor just to kind of fix this problem. All right. I hope that some of the techniques in this series are totally new to you, or potentially familiar tools used in a new way. Now, none of these are tools that I used when I was first learning to paint, but over the years working in game studios, I've just needed to find some time-saving techniques to meet those tight deadlines. And these techniques have saved me time and time again. So I'd encourage you to just give these a try using the included worksheets and on the example illustration. And also, like usual, these tools work even better if you can master those keyboard shortcuts. Now, don't worry about copying my process exactly. Make these tools your own, and just design yourself a workflow to suit your needs. And most importantly, have fun with this. Once again, I want to thank you for supporting the site. This video really does make a difference. And make sure to stay tuned for future videos in the library and new releases in the store. Have fun painting.